Welcome to the Mindset Game podcast. I'm Vered Kogan, your host, and I am delighted to have Lion Goodman back with us. Lion is founder of the Clear Beliefs Institute. He is a professional certified therapeutic coach with 40 years of experience as an executive teacher, healer, and subconscious pattern detective. He is the creator of the Clear Beliefs method for deleting limiting beliefs, healing childhood wounds, and resolving traumas from the past. More than 600 coaches, therapists, and healers from around the world have graduated from his Clear Beliefs coach training. He is also the author of 5 books, including Clear Your Clients' Limiting Beliefs and Creating on Purpose. He's taught workshops on 4 continents, and his articles have been widely published in books, magazines, and blog sites. He's also been a featured speaker on summits, radio programs, podcasts, such as ours, of course, and television shows. And thousands of students, clients have reported profound transformations from his work, allowing them to feel freer, happier, and to, of course, achieve their goals. And Lion, it is absolutely wonderful to have you back on the show. Thank you.
Thank you, Vered. It's a pleasure to be here.
So our focus today is about how to influence others. And help them to perceive things in ways that could be very beneficial for them, for their well-being, for their careers, and of course, for their future. And so can you tell us kind of how you define influence and how do we go about accessing more influence?
Sure. First of all, to talk about influence, we have to compare it to control. And so I want to talk about control first, then come back to influence, if that's okay.
Of course.
So the brain mind wants to feel safe. And so one of the ways to feel safe is to be in control. Even babies who are newborns are trying to figure out, how do I manipulate the world? How do I get cared for? If I cry and make a fuss, I'll get cared for. Or some babies conclude if I'm quiet and don't cry out, I'll get cared for. So the brain is set up to identify these patterns and then to use those patterns to survive and thrive. And one of the ways to survive and thrive in a social environment is to gain control over others, whether that control is manipulation or influence or persuasion. Babies are influencing their mothers and fathers as much as the fathers and mothers are trying to influence the baby. So because we want to feel safe, control is one of those mechanisms that we use. We want to control ourselves to feel safe. We want to control others to feel safe. We want to control our environments or our social structures to feel safe. We want to know who we are. And in any social hierarchy, apes, wolves, chickens, there's a pecking order and a hierarchy. And if you're above someone, you get to control them, you get to beat them up, you get to tell them what to do. And so part of our inner drive is to know where we are in the hierarchy, because we're social creatures, we're social animals. So we try to control those below us, we get controlled by those above us. So this is the nature of hierarchy. And business and capitalism are based on these principles of gather people together, get them to do what you want them to do, and make a profit. So capitalism has built incredible structures on our planet. It has raised the level of safety and security for billions of people. And it's also caused some damage because control is only partially successful. And we know this from trying to control other people, right? They tend to rebel. So for a leader in a company, whether it's a team leader, a manager, or a CEO, when they're trying to exert control over others, there's going to be pushback. And so there's a great saying of, let's conspire to not row. If everybody in the rowboat says, let's not row, it's not going to go anywhere, right? And that can happen in a team in a corporate environment where people are just pushing against the control mechanisms that are being enforced and basically either being absenteeism, or another thing that's called presenteeism. They're showing up for work physically, but mentally they're checked out.
Yeah.
So all of this is influenced by this idea of control, persuasion, and influence. It's like, how do we have human relationships that can get things done, but in a way that doesn't make a person feel controlled? Because when you feel controlled, you get angry. That's one of the things that's the source of anger, either being out of control or being controlled. Anger is the natural consequence. So how do we communicate with each other? How do we influence each other? How do we persuade each other without causing that pushback against control?
So well said. And I agree. I believe, and we see this in the change management research, that when people feel that sense of agency, that sense of control, that they have some choice, some say in the matter, a voice in the matter, that they're much more likely to lean into a change, even if they don't quite know how to do it, or they don't yet have the confidence in themselves to be able to, adapt their behavior in the way that they're asked. And there's another aspect that you said there, kind of the rowboat metaphor, right? Like, and you also said kind of about not expecting it to go anywhere, which is, the other side of influence, or the other aspect of influence, which is helping people to expect that the change will be successful, expect that they will be successful. And that's kind of, I know your world, right? The world of beliefs. Because when they have that expectation and they feel safe, they're not feeling controlled. Yes, they're feeling safe. Then I think when you have those two things just tend to roll a lot more quickly and easily.
I agree. And my first career was in headhunting. And I saw people wanting to leave their jobs because of a boss who was a jerk or a toxic environment. That was more common than just even, I want a better job. It's like, I need to get out of here, because they felt controlled, because their boss was, was a mean bastard, pardon the language, and it was toxic for them. They had to get out, and that's one way of being in control, is by leaving, right? So corporations today need to encourage engagement. There's statistics on disengagement are shocking. In some companies, 65% of their employees are disengaged at some level. Now, if we could just take that 65% of disengagement and make it 25%, the productivity of the company would skyrocket, right? So how do we do that? How do we do it? We certainly don't do it through control, because then you get the pushback and the disengagement. So what are the needs for managers, bosses, CEOs, and boards? How do we switch from that old hierarchical control structure into something that's more productive?
And, this is such an important conversation, especially these days, because people are so overwhelmed and stressed out. And when there is that incredible level of incoherence, then people who are on the leadership side are more likely to control, or because there's a lot of uncertainty. Yes. And and those on the receiving end of it are much more likely to kind of step back and disengage, as you said, because it's just too much for the system. And so, and I love what you shared about kind of your headhunting background, what you saw. And I've often heard, people don't leave jobs, they leave bosses. And, and this kind of really demonstrates how important it is that leaders really empower their people, right? Give them some choices within a certain allowable bandwidth, of course, allow them to feel that sense of empowerment. It was really interesting. Just yesterday, I was one of the classes that I'm taking. It's a Harvard class called Self and Identity. And the professor is an expert in diversity. And she said, what we see from research is that it's not enough to just kind of, let's say, have diversity in a team, multiple perspectives, but you got to empower them. Sometimes just adding diversity is actually not going to make things, it's actually might make things even worse, but you've got to empower, give them that agency that you speak of, in order for them to be able to have the influence and for us to have more creative, productive teams.
Exactly. The history of Toyota is a perfect example. When Denning went over to Japan and started helping the Japanese make better factories, they they asked the people on the floor, the manufacturing guys, what could we do to make this process better? We want to hear from you. We want to know. And they put up suggestion boxes, and they got thousands of suggestions, and they started implementing them, and people felt heard. They got more productive. They felt like they had contributed, and Toyota became one of the top industries in the world because they actually invited their employees to contribute, and everybody wants to contribute. And if they can't contribute, they get frustrated.
Yeah, it's such a great example. I even remember after, 25 years of the Oprah show, I remember her saying the one thing I learned from all those years, all those conversations, right, with all types of people, different levels and so on in organizations, is that everyone just wants to feel validated. They want to feel heard. They want to feel respected, whether we even take their feedback and implement it or not, because sometimes that's not feasible to do, but giving them the respect to express their point of view sometimes is even enough for them to lean into an uncomfortable change.
Mm-hmm. As a headhunter, I saw that whatever the dysfunction in the organization was usually starting at the top. As an example, psychopaths and narcissists are about 1% of the population each. Really, people who could be diagnosed as that. In the executive suite, they're 4% of the population. Now, there's a reason for that. People who don't care about others, who are willing to step on others and use others, rise up through the organization. Those who care, they have a different team, they have a different influence, but they're not willing to step on other people and crush them in order to get up the corporate ladder. But those who are willing rise to the top. So it's part of the problem with hierarchy. A hierarchy is a structure that started tens of thousands of years ago when city-states began being formed, and it was a better way to organize the food and the distribution of resources among a larger population. Well, hierarchy is good as far as it goes, but when the people above you don't care about you, then that's when you start saying, what am I doing here? Why should I even be here? Why should I contribute? If there's care at the top, it's a whole different matter. And so there's organizations like corporate capitalism, conscious capitalism, that are trying to influence capitalists and owners to say, actually, if you care about your people, your employees and your customers and the planet and our purpose, you actually produce better financial results. So that's been shown time and time again that organizations that are caring organizations actually have a better outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's really cool here is also the distinction between kind of the perception that people have about how much their leaders care about them versus the reality, because sometimes leaders really do care. But it's not perceived as such because they're not doing the right things. Yes, they might not have the right strategies. They might be themselves stressed out. And even though they deeply care, they're more controlling than they would like to be, or even than they're conscious of, right? They might not realize what they're doing because of the distress. They're just not thinking clearly. So what are some strategies for all those leaders that are listening to you now about how to be more caring, how to give more agency and choice so that people can feel that sense of safety?
It's said that for men in particular, the longest distance a man can travel is the 18 inches between his head and his heart. So in all of my work with corporate executives, with people at all levels, I found out that when the heart is open, when the feeling state is there, when you can tell, there's an old saying that no matter what you say or how you say it, the one thing you communicate is your attitude. So we have all of this very deep perceptual apparatus that looks for micro movements in the face, looks for how the eyes are looking for you. We can tell when someone cares about us or not by looking in their eyes. Is their heart open, or are they steely? This steely look of like, I'm in control. So people are looking at you. If you're in your heart, they're going to be able to tell. What does that mean? That means that part of your attention is here. Your attention is mostly here in the head, but there's some attention here in the care and love center. And so this is the reason it's a hard distance for a man to travel, is because all of our programming and training is to get us into our heads or into our bodies and skipping over the heart center. Will is down here at the belly center, right? Be willful, just do it. No pain, no gain. Keep going. Big boys don't cry, right? So I work with a lot of men, so that's my orientation here. Women can get masculinized in the corporate environment because that's the only way they can compete and win, unfortunately. But that's changing. But for men, we're trained away from our hearts. Medical doctors are trained not to feel, because if they felt when they were cutting through somebody's body, they wouldn't be very good at their job. And executives similarly are taught, well, if you care too much, you're going to make decisions that are based on people rather than profit. And here's where that profit over people comes in, right? If all you care about is profit and your only audience is your shareholders, you're going to make different decisions and operate differently than if you also are concerned about your customers, your employees, and the planet. That's what conscious capitalism is all about. And that's what we need to aim for in our culture and in our capitalism, is a caring culture that sees more widely than just the profit motive.
Absolutely. And we've had guests on the show from the Heart Math Institute, and that is a research institution, as you know, that really does a lot of work in that. I know I have a team of consultants that do even those programs, activating the heart of teams for greater influence through operating from a place of compassionate latitude and curiosity. So how do beliefs play into this? Because I know you have such a deep understanding of how we create these neurological programs, these belief programs. How does that play into whether we control or influence, and how that works?
One of my favorite sayings that I made up is, in an emergency, apply awareness first. So becoming aware of your beliefs, aware of your drives, aware of your inner psychological pushes and pulls is the first step. And getting curious about yourself is step one. Getting curious about others is step two. Beliefs are the infrastructure of the human mind, in the same way that neurons are the infrastructure of the brain. And so our beliefs are these conclusions we came to growing up about how to survive, how to thrive, how to get along, who am I, who are other people. So this is an infrastructure very deep in the psyche and the subconscious mind. And often those programs that we adopted when we were children don't work so well as adults, but they're still driving us. So I use the example of the baby in the crib. If I cry and make a fuss, I'll get taken care of. Well, that's a really good belief for a baby. But most of us know at least one adult who's still using that strategy to get attention, right? And equally, the opposite belief, if I stay still and don't say anything, I'll get taken care of. That can turn into someone who can't speak up and express themselves. So we have to examine those deep beliefs. What conclusions did we come to in childhood, whether through indoctrination or through our own conclusions, through behavioral patterns, things that happened to us, the traumas that we experienced, and what we decided about who we are and how the world is and how other people are. When you begin to take those things apart, you start seeing your own inner drives, your own inner reactions, why you do the things you do, and how you do them, the strategies that we use to get along in the world. So control, for example, is based on that need for safety. If it's the same, it's safe. If it's different, it's dangerous. This goes back to the early hominids who didn't know what the rustling in the grass was. And if it was a saber-toothed tiger, you could be dead. If it was a rabbit, you could be fed, right? So these are really deep programs in the belief structure we have these biological and inherited belief structures. And then we get our social structures from culture and family and our ancestral history. And so we have tens of thousands of beliefs in us that are operating below the conscious level. And if something isn't working in life, like you're not getting along with your spouse or your neighbor or your boss or your employees, there's a place to look deep in the psyche to see what is the basis upon which your behavior is working. So when I work with executives and people in corporate environments, I'm helping them look to see what are the causes of the current behavior. Because often people will repeat the same behavior, even if it's not working, even if it's getting them in trouble, even if it's causing damage. And so I take people back to their original learnings to see what conclusions they came to about how to treat others or how to treat themselves or how to be in the world.
Brilliant. And I love that, getting to the root of it, rather than working on the surface of the behavior, the manifested behavior, because it's simply a projection of something that's very deep as a survival mechanism.
Right.
Which operates automatically, which is why that awareness piece is so tough sometimes, especially in the moment of stress, because it's so unconscious to us, that oftentimes, unless we're like, hit by a 2x4 to wake up and begin to question, our beliefs, or our survival or well-being is threatened in some serious way that, again, alerts us to wake up. Oftentimes we just operate from those things completely unconsciously. And so what can people do to begin to become aware of their beliefs, their expectations in this world?
In my free ebook, How to Clear Your Clients' Limiting Beliefs, I offer an exercise called belief self-diagnosis. And it's a way to begin looking at your beliefs. So you take a topic like life and you ask yourself the question, what do I believe about life? And then you just listen to your subconscious mind speaking. It's talking all the time, but we rarely listen to it. Just see what pops up. Life is good. And then you ask the question again, what do I believe about life? Life is hard. And you write it down. And you keep asking that question over and over again. And you just make a long list, because we have thousands of beliefs in there about every topic. And you write and write and write until there's no more new ones. And then you can begin looking at them and going, okay, which of these are aligned with my virtues and values? Which of these are having a good impact on my life? And which ones are getting in the way? And then once you've identified the ones that are getting in your way, then the next step is to begin to clear them. That's what I teach, is how to do that. But that's the place to start, is self-examination on every single topic in life and what conclusions you have inside. What are the drivers, the beliefs that are driving your behavioral strategies and your adoptive strategies that are causing the trouble in your life.
Yeah. Such an important exercise to do. And I think even just becoming conscious, that I have certain beliefs, and through the lens of leadership and managing change, leading change, having that genuine influence on people, it's really important to pause and say, what do I believe about leadership? What do I believe about my ability to lead? What do I believe about the people in my team that I wish to influence, to support, to empower, inspire? What do I believe about their capacity to do this thing that I'd like for them to do? And oftentimes, for most people, seeing is believing. So if they have evidence that the individual or the team has not been able to perform in a certain way, then they kind of tend to carry that expectation forward, right? Then more than likely, because of that, right, the brain will say, well, it's going to be projected and it's probably not going to be successful in the future. And then we radiate that belief out. And it seems to have an effect where people kind of live into our expectations, even if it's, more limiting, negative expectations. So what about beliefs from an influence perspective? What's important for us to do or to know about that?
The first thing to know is that although we say, I'll believe it when I see it, what's actually operating is I'll see it when I believe it.
That's right.
So your beliefs, whatever they are going to filter your perceptions. So if you're looking through the belief, employees are just replaceable parts, then everywhere you look, you're going to see replaceable parts. If you look through a lens that says employees are precious contributors to our company goals, then that's what you're going to see through that filter. So the most important thing first is to see what you believe. The second most important thing is to ask what other people believe. What are their perceptual filters? And I'm sure you do this in change management, right? You have to let those things emerge to see what the culture really is, because everybody's got a mission statement on the wall somewhere, but most people don't even know what it is, let alone what it indicates, and very few actually follow it, follow those particular values. So we have to find out what each individual values, what's their perception, what's driving their perception. And when we can get it all out on the table, it's like face-up poker. It's like, well, okay, at least we know what we're dealing with, and it's all available for everyone to see. Now we can ask the question, what would work better? But until we expose those underlying beliefs, we're going to be operating on automatic pilot, and we're not going to have much availability for change. So, how do we influence? We get curious, as you said, curiosity. What are my beliefs? How am I operating? What's causing me to react the way I do? And Jared, what's your belief about leadership? If I get curious and I ask you to look inside, then we get to have it on the table and we get to examine it together. And now it's a collaboration. It's not a hierarchy where I tell you what to believe because I think it's important.
And if, let's say, somebody on the team has a different belief than you, let's say, as a leader. So let's say you would like to implement some kind of a change, but the person you're speaking with says, I don't believe this is possible, or management's not going to have our back, or there's not enough time or money or whatever, right? Again, conflict of beliefs. Then what do you do as that influencer to help the other person see what's possible?
We're trying to move from hierarchy to collaboration. But the problem is that people who try to collaborate often throw out the hierarchy rules and structures. And so then collaboration doesn't work. So there's a kind of merger between hierarchy and collaboration where there's an operating system called the collaborative operating system. My friend Rachel Connerly has written about this and teaches about this. And basically, it's that there's a structure that can be brought into collaboration that really makes it work. And one of the structures is make sure everybody has a say or is represented by somebody who has a say, so that all the stakeholders are there at the table. And if somebody blocks a decision, then you say, okay, then we're not going to make a decision until your needs are satisfied in some way. Now that takes longer than just making a decision and having it implemented. But here's the difference. When hierarchy, you make a very fast decision, and then it takes this long to implement because of all the pushback. In collaboration, it takes this long to make a decision, but then it only takes this long to implement because everybody's on board and there's no pushback. So collaboration, when it works, actually works better than hierarchy because you've got the whole team rowing in the same direction.
So brilliant. I love that. I love this concept of the polarities, right? It's not one or the other. Kind of over time, we need both. And the fact that, it's not going to be, at least up front, as you said, the most efficient way to do things, right? That more collaborative approach, giving equal airtime to everybody, right? All of that does take time, because you're building trust, you're building rapport. But as you said, it's going to save you loads more time on the back end because you won't have to reconvince people over and over again to trust the process, to trust you as a leader, to lean into this uncomfortable, uncertain change. And yet in most organizations, especially under times of stress and overwhelm, efficiency is like number one. We don't have time for this. There are multiple layers of change that we need to implement. And, we just don't have the time. And so what do you say to those leaders that are like, this sounds really amazing, Lion, but not realistic in my organization?
Well, I would say compare it to your life. If a quick decision and telling people what to do works in your marriage and your family, maybe that's the right method for you. if you find that a little bit more open response might work better, that would be a good example of, what it takes to make things work for everyone. And again, there's evidence that this collaborative operating system works to actually shrink the time to success. And the old way didn't include it. So the old way is tell people what to do, punish them if they don't do it, or fire them, and make them believe what you believe from the outside in, indoctrinate them, tell them what is so and what is true. Well, that's in education, it's in families, it's in religion, it's pretty much everywhere in the culture, right? But that has lasted as long as it has. It's built what it's built, but now it's hit its own limitations. We can't go any further as a civilization based on what we've done in the past. So we need some new methods and techniques. And those new methods and techniques can take us the next level where we actually create a sustainable civilization for everyone, not just some really good stuff for a few people.
100%. And I think what we speak of from an organizational lens is really a culture shift for those individuals that, or leaders that have not already created that type of culture. So yes, it is going to take more time and effort up front, but then there's going to be that carryover effect, because if we have that rapport, that trust, right, that people have that sense of agency, as you said, and so we're able to co-create, some beautiful changes, then for the next time, people have an expectation that even though it's new and it's different and we don't know how to do it yet or whatever, that we can pull it together, that we can collaborate and create something even greater than what was, even if the what was is pretty comfortable to begin with. Let's say it's not even an issue or a problem, right? But we can grow and evolve still. And I think it's that approach of, we versus I, because when a leader is incoherent, and this is where I love that you talked about the heart, because it really starts, in my company, we say change starts with you, right? So, because as you said, and research has validated this, that what makes or breaks a change is the sponsor of the change, right? Are they doing the ABCs? Are they actively, visibly participating in the change throughout the entire change process, not just at the beginning in the announcement stage? Are they building that coalition of change agents? Are they communicating with the employees, right? Because if they're not doing that, then people are not going to be engaged. They're not going to trust them or the process. And then again, their limiting belief about that is going to impact their ability to access the ideas, the motivation to do what they need to do. And so this is such an important conversation line. I really hope that every leader takes this to heart in the literal sense, right? To heart, because their lives could be so much easier when there is even greater compassion and curiosity. Because if somebody's not adapting to the change, it may very well be because of certain beliefs that they have, right? Maybe beliefs carried over from the last time there was a change in that organization or previous organization, or maybe beliefs from childhood, as you said, from long, long ago, that may be manifesting as resistance in the workplace. And so we want to acknowledge the resistance and listen, as you said, to listen to what, have that awareness, as you said, step one, awareness, right? To have awareness of what is it, the story that they're telling themselves about this, how true is it? So what about those leaders that are, again, saying this all makes sense to me, but I have my own stuff, right? Like it's really hard for me to be able to be present with people because I've got so much stuff, so much chatter in my mind, so many responsibilities. How can I actually do this?
Well, the leader needs to get some coaching. A good coach for a leader will help them become more aware, will help them become more relational, right? And broaden their focus from, I've got to get this done for the shareholders because my stock's slipping down, to how do we build a sustainable organization? Part of this is historical. Like when things didn't change very much, like seasonal changes were happening, but day by day, it was pretty much the same. Problems were simpler, solutions were simpler. And so hierarchy and the boss man gets to make the decision actually worked pretty well. But we're now in a highly complex society where problems are no longer simple, they're highly complex. they're sticky and they're gigantic. And so a gigantic sticky problem cannot be solved through hierarchy. It can only be solved by collective wisdom. And so the CEO who's in charge and who's trying to control everything it's not going to work in a complex environment where things are moving faster and faster and getting better and better and worse in more places all the time. That's the environment we're in. And so first, the CEO or the leader, the team leader, whoever it is, needs to slow down and think about the question, how do we turn this current problem into something that's sustainable for the long term? And how do I get other people involved in making it so? Because I can't do it myself. Nobody can do anything great themselves. And so collaboration, communication, respect for others, bringing people into the decision-making and even at the advice level, that's what creates sustainability. And so that's going to ultimately reduce the stress on the CEO as opposed to increase it.
Yeah, again, well said. And so going back to beliefs, if you don't mind a little bit, if a leader is conscious of a belief that they have, let's say some belief about an employee on their team that they wish to influence in some positive way, what can they do, if anything, to influence the other person's perception? So whether it's perception about their ability to adapt to the change, right, to help them believe in themselves, believe in the change itself, and what's possible for the organization, what can they do to do that?
We've all tried to influence someone from the outside in, right? We're constantly trying to change the other person's mind about things. If you just believe this, you'd be better off. That's often couched in those terms. Like, I understand you believe that and all, but it's wrong. or I understand that's how you were trained, but I was trained differently, and it's a better belief system than you've got. Well, that attitude is not helpful because people don't like to be made wrong. It's one of the things that bugs us the most, right? So outside in applications generally don't work unless somebody really says, oh, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. In that case, that works. But for somebody who's a human being who's alive and aware, then you can't influence them by just telling them what to do differently or be different. You have to work from the inside out. When I work with people individually, I go down and find the core of why they came up with that belief, show them that it doesn't work so well anymore, and actually change things from the inside. And then that lens changes, and then they're seeing a different world. In the case of a boss and an employee, the first thing to do is to find out what's inside that other person. That's the first thing, not to tell them what is wrong with them, but to understand how they came to that conclusion, what belief is running that particular behavior. And when that's the inquiry, then people actually feel like you care about them. They feel that you care and that you want to understand them. And then the box opens. And when you have an open box, when the person feels cared for and cared about and feels understood, now you can have influence. Up until that point, it's pointless. You can't actually shove more, a new belief in on top of an old one. That's the problem with affirmations. Well, I have a lot of money. I have a lot of money. I have a lot of money. And it just causes the old beliefs to come up and reassert themselves. No, you don't. Look in your bank account. You don't have a lot of money. You're lying to yourself, right? So we have to clear the old before we can plant the new.
Yeah. It's so interesting. I had Dr. Roland McCready, who's the head of research at the HeartMath Institute, on the show, and we were talking about shifting unconscious baselines, what we're calling beliefs today, these deeper expectations. And, he said, research shows you cannot do it from the head. You cannot do it by giving logic, right? Saying this is the right way. It will never work. It will not stick. It has to be through the heart, in the literal sense, through the organ of the heart. We have to shift it at that deeper unconscious level, which can only happen through compassion, by cutting through some of these deeper over-attachments that are creating the judgments or whatever that maladaptive behavior is. it has to be done through the compassion of the heart. And so I think kind of the essence of our conversation today is that, really control happens, as you said, because we're feeling not safe, and we need to, to hold on to that strategy to make ourselves feel safer, or at least the perception that we're safer. Mm-hmm. Whereas influence is about genuinely caring for the other person from a heart place. So it's head and heart together, of course, because we, of course, have certain goals and we want to see the people do well. It's head and heart together. And when we take the time to first do the work ourselves, to look inside, our own kind of mind and heart and see what is perhaps creating our own behaviors and results in our life, then and only then, when we give ourselves more compassion, shift some of our limiting mindsets, then we can be more present, more curious, more compassionate with other people, because we'll be able to have a greater influence on them from an energetic perspective when we're more coherent.
Very well said. Very well said. And I want to make sure we don't leave out the body or the gut, right? Those are also as important as the head and the heart, because many people are more body oriented rather than heart oriented or head oriented, and they need to be included too. So we need to speak to all three centers. We also need to know that we're multidimensional beings having multidimensional experiences, which includes physical, intellectual, emotional, spiritual, right? Those are relational, energetic. It's like we are very complex creatures. And by recognizing our own complexity and our own infinite possibilities, we can start seeing it in others as well. So when you have one person who sees the other as capable of anything because they're a creator in their own universe and they're seeing you that way, that makes for a lot of fun in creating something new.
Yeah, super cool. And it's so fun that you're even saying about that, because what we see is that there's much greater intuition, right? Innovation, creativity, when we collectively are more coherent. And I just love that you brought up kind of that concept of those 4 domains of resilience, right? As you said, the body, kind of the gut, you've got the physical, the emotional, the mental, and the spiritual. We are multidimensional beings. And so what is kind of a last parting kind of insight or kind of guidance for any leader listening that wishes to embody even more of that energy with themselves and with their teams?
I always have this as my last recommendation. If you don't like what's happening, examine your beliefs. If there's something in your way, examine your beliefs. If there's a relationship that's not working, start by examining your beliefs. And if you want to have a better life, examine your beliefs. And I would say in a better business, examine your beliefs. And then the more you know about your own belief structure, the more you understand how you came to those conclusions, how they drive you, where they're driving you, the easier it is to understand others. And that's where things open up, is in mutual understanding, mutual vision, mutual appreciation. And then we can have a sustainable culture and actually survive on this planet.
Oh, thank you. So how can people learn more about your amazing programs, your books, your coaching?
Well, first, I do suffer from multiple website disorder, so I just want to say that up front. My leadership program is luminaryleadership.net, and that's for leaders of organizations or companies. People interested in my training, because I do train people in these methodologies, that's available at clearbeliefs.com. And my personal website is liongoodman.com, and all my articles are there, including one on control and influence. So those are the 3 best places to get me.
Wonderful. Well, from all my heart, thank you for having this important conversation with us today, for doing this important belief clearing work in the world. I'm 100% certain that it is making a difference. If just one person is able to access, this more elevated emotion, more of their coherence, then we're all better off. And so thank you.
Thank you, Vered. I so appreciate being with you and you having me on your show. Thank you.